What up, mains? It's me, Mr. Nuno again. About to go to bed, but I had a thought. I wanted to share a story with you guys. Basically, tell the story about how I became a shoehead and how a young kid in the Rio Grande Valley was able to score shoes. I hear a lot of YouTubers, man. They say I buy these shoes now because when I was young, I wasn't able to afford it. My parents wouldn't buy it for me or buy those shoes for me. Those are the ones I wanted when I was in fourth grade, third grade. Well, the way I started was around, I guess, fourth. I had some LA Gears. They were black and red. They had double shoelaces, um, red and white, and they were all black with red accents. And you could basically use you would use both red and white shoelaces, and it looked legit. The only one that could do it though was my neighbor. She was older, and she knew how to tie the laces perfectly to where you could use both laces. I don't know how she did it, but she did it. So um, that was around fourth or fifth grade. Sixth, well, in fifth grade, I got in trouble in school, and I was in the gifted and talented class, and I got in trouble in school because my teacher hated me, Miss Edwards. She hated me and treated me like crap. So one day I said, I'm done with this. I'm going home. Midday, I asked to go to the restroom. She didn't let me go. So I kept asking. She said, put two check marks next to your name. Remember the check marks? That meant you weren't acting well in class. So I put the two check marks next to my name, and I took off. I went to the restroom, looked at myself in the mirror, and said, am I going to let this lady bully me all day or for the rest of the year? And I said, heck no. I'm taking off. So I took off. I I remember there was a church in between the school and my house. So I went through the church parking lot and everything. The coach, man, he was there was a playground next to the church, and the coach, man, I swear he was gonna spot me, but I hid behind this big truck, and then I booked it, and I made it home. I made it to my house. I used to walk to school. Back in the day, you could walk or ride your bike to school. It was safe. Well, anyway, my dad was at home from lunch, and he was pissed that I went home. So he took me right back to school. But from then on, the teacher treated me differently. Of course, she lost a student. So the next thing that happened was a couple of days or weeks later, they took me out of the gifted and talented program and put me in a lower class. They were a few lessons behind, so it was super easy for me. I belonged in a gifted program, or with at least the content was should be a little tougher. So the next year, in sixth grade, I was placed in um, not in gifted and talented. I was placed in the lower classes because back then they used to, gifted, and then lower classes with kids that were a bit slower. So I was in one of those slower classes, and the content was super easy for me. The teachers would always, say, "What is he doing in here?" And I guess because it was disciplinary, they didn't want to put me in a gifted class because I would disrupt the class. But I wasn't a bad kid, so it was just that one incident because the teacher was bullied, and I wasn't gonna take it. So anyway, I'm trying to get to the part where in sixth grade I meet a buddy. I mean, I used to give him the answers on tests. I would always help him out, and we were on the same basketball team It was like a youth league. His name was George Overa. Super cool. He was really tall for being in sixth grade, and we were on the same basketball team and the same class. And his brother worked for Foot Locker, so he always had the latest kicks. And he saw that I had those Raptors, the Jordans, the retros. Well, they weren't retros back then. They were just the latest Jordans. So they were the seven Jordans, the Raptor colorway. And he said, "Hey man, my brother works at Foot Locker, and anytime there's used shoes or defective shoes, they send it to a certain address, and they receive the shoe they request. So if there was a messed up shoe, they would send it to a certain address in Tennessee, in Nike, in Tennessee, and this is only for Nike shoes or Jordans. So what they would do is send it off to Tennessee, and then Tennessee would send them back a brand new pair of shoes. So what I would do is, uh, with those Raptors, I sent them in once they got old, and I wrote a letter. I put a letter inside the box, and it was a little kid handwriting and everything on half of a sheet of paper. I wrote down, "Dear Nike, please send me a pair of Jordan, Aqua, whatever they were. I would go to the Foot Locker, and I would look up the style code, and I would look up the colorway and everything, and I would write it down. I'd ask to try on the shoe. I would look at what it said on the side of the box. I would write it down, and then I'd go home and write the letter and and include that information. That way, they would be able to send me a shoe. So what they were doing in Foot Locker, I tried to replicate that from my home. So when my shoes would get old, I'd send it out to Nike, and then they would send me a new pair of shoes. And I would request Jordans or Barclays. In sixth grade, I did it twice. So I got the playoffs eights and the aqua eights. I remember that. And then in seventh grade, what I would do is at the beginning of the year, I would buy a good pair of shoes, use them up, and then a couple months would go by, and I would use them up, and then I'd send them into Nike, that address, and they would send me back the shoe I requested. So at that time, I was into Barclays, so I would send the raggedy Barclays to the Nike factory, and then they'd send me the next pair of Barclays, the newest Barclays. So I had Barclays in seventh grade, and then in eighth grade, I kept doing the same thing. I would buy a good pair of shoes at the beginning, and then request. Every time my shoes would get old, I would request. Sometimes I would even, I remember putting like a screwdriver into my Aqua 8s because I wanted to get a new pair already. So I would send it to Nike, and they'd send me a new pair back. I remember doing that, and now I think, man, if I would have kept those shoes. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. It's just a crazy story on how, as a kid, I would send in my old shoes to Nike, and they would send me a new pair, whatever pair I requested. And it was a little kid handwriting. I would send it in the box, and everything in the actual shoe box. And I would put the shoe box in another box, put include the address, my address, the return address, and then, of course, they would send it to my home. They'd send my new pair of shoes to my home. And it was just crazy to me that it kept working. And it worked all the way until I was in 10th grade. And then all of a sudden, the packages, they started coming back, return to sender, return to sender. I tried it like two more times, and the packages would just come back. So I guess somebody got smart and said, "Hey, this is just some kid writing in, writing a letter and requesting new shoes." Or maybe somebody knew and they knew I was a kid and they just went along with it and said, "Look at this kid. He found our address and he's sending in his shoes and he's trading them for a newer pair." And it was it worked for a long time. Sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade, ninth grade. A good 4 year run of turning in shoes after shoe after shoe. So I'd buy a good pair at the beginning of the year and turn them in like maybe twice, and then I'd buy a good pair, turn it in twice. So it was crazy. That is why my friends would always say, "How the heck do you have all these new Jordans, new Barclays? How did you get those shoes?" One time they sent me some shoes that had already been discontinued. Back then they didn't retro shoes, so uh, they sent me a pair of shoes that had already sold out and everything. It was like 6 months later or a year later, I guess, and it was the Barclays. They were purple and black, Air Max, and I had them brand new, and everybody was like, "Man, how did you get them brand new?" All my buddies that were in football and basketball, in middle school, they would freak out. So, it was cool. So that's how I became a shoe head. I mean, I always had a cool pair of shoes since fifth grade. Even before that, I remember having yellow and blue Blazers, Nike Blazers, in like third grade, or was it first grade? See, like my memory back then, in those younger days is a little sketchy, but for sure, I mean, I got really lucky to meet that guy, George Olvera, his brother that worked at Foot Locker. Shout out to them if they ever see this video. But it was so awesome. And I just felt that I had to tell that story. I mean, that's how I became a sneakerhead, a real shoe head. I mean, and now it's so hard to get shoes because they're so expensive. And I mean, I even busted out because the address he gave me, I wrote it down on I still have this comic books box back when I was in sixth grade, fifth grade. It's awesome, man. Like it has, it came with a bunch of comics, and I bought it when I was in fifth grade. And the address, it's right there, man. That's the address. Is that the address? Yeah, Nike. What is that? 8900 Winchester Road, Memphis, Tennessee, 38125. I Google Earthed it, and it was like a Nike distribution center, and they moved down the street from this address. Like this address used to be the main one. It got shut down because I was reading some articles on what happened, and it got shut down, and they moved to a state of the art facility like down the street. So that's probably what happened in 10th grade. They moved to that new state of the art facility, and I was sending this to the wrong address. Maybe it would have still worked. Maybe it still works today. I mean, who knows? Who knows? But yeah, that's story time with Mista Nuno. Just wanted to kind of tell you the crazy stuff that I've been through as a sneakerhead. And thanks for listening. Like, comment, subscribe. Hope you have a great rest of your evening. Laters.